Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradari Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradari Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Gaur Premanande. Which verse is it? 106 or 109? The one with the purport.
It's 106, so usually we do the other way around.
It's 106.
Yes.
Okay. Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda.
Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda.
Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jai Shri Chaitanya Charitamrita ki jai. So today we're reading from Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila 22, the process of devotional service. Text 106. Shravanadi kriya thara swarupa lakshan Huh? Not this one? This is 109. Okay. So we do it as we usually do. Shravanadi kriyatara swarup lakshana tathasta lakshana upajaya premadan. Translation. The spiritual activities of hearing, chanting, remembering, and so forth are the natural characteristics of devotional service. The marginal characteristics is that it awakens pure love of Krishna. Text 107. Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema Sadhya Kabhunai Shravanadi Sudha Chitte Karai Udhai. Pure love for Krishna is eternally established in the heart of the living entities. It is not something to be gained from another source. When the heart is purified by hearing and chanting, this love naturally awakens. Text 108. Eita sadhana bhakti duita prakar, eka vaidhi bhakti raganuga bhakti ar. There are two processes of practical devotional service. One is regulative devotional service, and the other is spontaneous devotional service. Text 109. This one we chant together. Ragahina jana vache shashrera agyai. Ragahina jana vache Ragahina jane bache shastrera agyai. Ragahina jana bache shastrera agyai. Vaidhi bhakti balitare sarva shastragai. Vaidhi bhakti balitare sarva shastragai. Vaidhi bhakti balitare sarva shastragai. Vaidhi bhakti balitare sarva Ragahina jana bache shastrera agyai. Ragahina jana bache shastrera agyai. Vaidhi bhakti balitare sarva shastragai. Vaidhi bhakti balitare sarva shastragai. Ragahina jana bache shastrera agyai. Ragahina jana bache shastrera agyai. Vaidhi bhakti balitare sarva shastragai. Vaidhi bhakti balitare sarva shastragai. Ragahina, who are without spontaneous attachment to Krishna. Jana, persons. Bhaja, execute devotional service. Shastrera agyai, according to the principles and regulations described in the revealed scriptures. Vaidhi bhakti, regulative devotional service. Bali, calling. Tare, that. Sarva Shastra, all revealed scriptures. Gaya, sing. Translations by Srila Prabhupada. Those who have not attained the platform of spontaneous attachment in devotional service render devotional service under the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master according to the regulative principles mentioned in the revealed scriptures. According to the revealed scriptures, this kind of devotional service is called Vaidhi Bhakti. Please repeat after me. Those who have not attained the platform of spontaneous attachment in devotional service render devotional service under the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master. according to the regulative principles mentioned in the revealed scriptures. According to the revealed scriptures, this kind of devotional service is called Vaidhi Bhakti. Purport. In the beginning, one has to hear from a bona fide spiritual master. This is favorable for advancing in devotional service. According to this process, one hears, chants, remembers, and engages in deity worship, acting under the directions of the spiritual master. These are the essential primary activities of devotional service. Devotional service must not be executed for some material purpose. One should not even have desire to merge into the absolute truth. One has to render such service out of love only. Ahaituki apratihata. Devotional service must be without ulterior motives. Then material conditions cannot check it. Gradually, one can rise to the platform of spontaneous loving service. A child is sent to school by force to receive an education. But when he gets a little taste of education and at an advanced stage, he automatically participates and becomes a learned scholar. One cannot force a person to become a scholar, but sometimes force is used in the beginning. A child is forced to go to school and read and write according to the instructions of his teachers. Such is the difference between Vaidhi Bhakti and spontaneous Bhakti. Dormant love for Krishna exists in everyone's heart, and it simply has to be awakened by the regulative process of devotional service. One has to learn to use a typewriter by following the regulative principles of the typing book. One has to place his fingers on the keys in such a way and practice. But when one becomes adept, he can type swiftly and correctly without even looking at the keys. Similarly, one has to follow the rules and regulations of devotional service as they are set down by the spiritual master. Then one can come to the point of spontaneous loving service. This love is already there within the heart of everyone. Nitya Siddha Krishna Prem. Spontaneous service is not artificial. One simply has to come to that platform by rendering devotional service according to the regulative principles. Thus one has to practice hearing and chanting and follow the other regulative principles by washing the temple, cleansing oneself, rising early in the morning, attending Mangalarti, and so on. If one does not come to the platform of spontaneous service in the beginning, he must adopt regulative service according to the instructions of the spiritual master. This regulative service is called Vaidhi Bhakti. Ragahina jana bache shastrera agyai Vaidhi Bhakti Balita Resha Sarva Shastragai. Those who have not attained the platform of spontaneous attachment in devotional service render devotional service under the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master according to the regulative principles mentioned in the revealed scriptures. According to the revealed scriptures, this kind of devotional service is called Vaidhi Bhakti. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Svapadantikam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasati Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So, we're continuing with Chaitanya Charitamrita, where Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu instructs Sanatana Goswami about the process of devotional service. The Vedas are actually meant to convey knowledge about the Supreme Personality of Krishna, of Godhead, Sri Krishna. Vedaischa sarvam aham eva vedya. Bhagavad Gita, it also states that Krishna declares that he is to be known by the Vedas, by studying Vedas. Furthermore, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu explains that the Vedic scriptures have three purposes. One is the establishing of Sri Chaitanya, of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, meaning giving the knowledge of Krishna and the relationship of the living entity to Krishna, Sambandha Gyan. The second purpose is to convey the process of devotional service, how to render devotional service, which is called Abhideya. And finally, the third state or purpose is the ultimate perfection, or the necessity, which is attaining love of Godhead or prayojana. So here Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu explains the process of devotional service, and it is been described that the practical application of devotional service has two aspects. One is Vaidhi Bhakti, or following regulative principles, and Raganuga Bhakti, which is spontaneous devotional service. We all actually belong most probably to the first part, which means following the regulative principles. This is quite understandable because being on the stage of spontaneous devotional service is actually a quite lofty state. It has been described that spontaneous devotional service is performed on the liberated stage, where one is completely free from any kind of contamination, material contamination by the three modes of material nature, where one has a spontaneous attraction to perform devotional service. One is constantly submerged in thoughts of Krishna, and in that way engages in his devotional service out of pure love. It also has been characterized by by Srila Rupa Goswami that regulative devotional service is actually performed out of a sense of duty, understanding the need to be engaged in devotional service, the devotee actually performs the different limbs of devotional service out of duty on the direction of the spiritual master. Whereas on the stage of spontaneous, loving devotional service, the motive is pure love. Rupa Goswami has explained the process very minutely by giving 9 different stages where the candidate, the devotee, actually goes through in order to achieve his goal, which is Krishna Prem, love of Godhead. The process actually starts with Shraddha. The first step is Shraddha, which means faith. We have to first develop faith in the scriptures and in the process. Prabhupada points out another meaning of Shraddha is also respect. We have to have respect. Unless and until we respect something, we actually won't take it very seriously. So faith is required. Then the next stage, when we develop faith, we actually develop the desire to associate with people who follow that process, means devotees, means sadhu sangha, second state. We actually associate with like-minded people. And in that way, we actually develop more and more the attachment to perform different activities, which is the third stage, bhajana kriya. We start to follow the process by implement different processes, activities which are favorable for developing devotional service. And then the fourth stage is anartha nivritti. By doing that, by being engaged in devotional service, anarthas, unwanted things, are actually removed from our heart. At one point, Prabhupada explains anarthas also with unnecessary necessities. In normal life, we think so many activities are necessary in order to maintain our status quo or maintain our social position, but they are actually due to our material contamination, and they're relative to our material identification. So, to a certain degree, they're necessities, but they're necessities on a temporary basis. For a certain time, it is helpful or even necessary to pursue these kind of activities. But for the eternal good, for the spiritual soul, they're actually not necessary. So these anarthas, they're actually hindering blocks on the way to achieve perfection in devotional service. So the next step, when the anarthas have been nullified nearly to 100%, one gets fixed nista. These anarthas are actually the cause of our unsteady devotional service. There is steady devotional service and unsteady devotional service. Unsteady devotional service means that sometimes we are very much enthusiastic and inspired to perform the process, and sometimes we slack. We are not that enthusiastic. But once we reach that state of nishta, means that we are fixed, the enthusiasm is actually constant. This is also described in Srimad Bhagavatam in the first Nastapreshu Avadreshu Nittam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistiki. There it states that by constantly performing service to the person Bhagavat and to the literature Bhagavatam, practically everything is removed. Unwanted things are removed from the heart, and one is established in devotional service. That stage is actually nistha. Prabhupada also makes the point that it means that practically everything, there is still some, but these lacks, so to say, are not really hampering the devotional service. So what is these conditions which keep us from being steady, which hinder us to perform devotional service on a regular basis? That Srimad Bhagavatam also explains. These are actually our association with the lower modes of material nature, meaning ignorance and passion. Tadarajas tamo bhava kama lobadayaschaye. At that time, the lower modes, tamas and rajas, are actually relinquished. And what are the characteristics of tama and raja? It is actually the hankering, the desiring, the greed. These qualities are actually removed, and the devotee is situated in the mode of goodness. Stitam sattve prasidati. That is necessary, because only if we are situated in a mode of goodness, we actually are able to distinguish what is what. We will be able to understand what is favorable and what is unfavorable to devotional service. And at that time, we are actually reaching the stage of positive scientific knowledge. Evam prasanna manaso bhagavat bhakti yogata bhagavat tattva vijnanam mukta sangha sajayam. That bhagavat tattva vijnanam, that positive, Prabhupada translates it as positive scientific knowledge. That stage is reached. And evam prasanna manaso, the mind is actually enthused. The devotee naturally becomes enthusiastic to perform devotional service. And at that time, mukta sangha sajayate, we're actually freed from the contamination of matter. At that stage, the devotee understands his transcendental position. He understands that he is not his body, but spirit. Aham Brahmasmi. And that is required. Prabhupada says that actually devotional service starts from that point, when we realize that we are not this material body, we are not this material mind, but we are spirit. So that stage is called Nistha. And naturally, when we are situated on that platform, understanding that we are not this body, we are not this material mind, we are spirit soul, taste, ruchi arises. That is actually the state where we can say spontaneity starts to rise. The previous stages are more that we have to fight against the contamination. It can be compared that you have two magnets. One is pulling us down to the material realm, to material consciousness, and another magnet is pulling us towards the spiritual reality. So as long as we are still covered with a certain degree of anarthas, it is actually a fight. We have to constantly check and fight that these influences are not pulling us down. But once we reach the stage of being fixed, then the pulling comes from the other side, naturally. As it is described in the purport, love of Godhead is actually our constitutional position, but due to being covered up by unwanted things, we are actually not perceiving it. So these coverings have to be cleansed so that the sun or the light of the spirit soul, the light of love of Krishna, slowly but surely shines through, and we are attracted and following that path. So, ruchi, at that stage, there is taste, and through that taste, attachment develops a Shakti. And when that attachment grows, it grows into bhava. Rupa Goswami has described the two aspects at that stage. One is bhava and one is rati. And when rati actually develops further, it develops into pure love of Godhead, which is Krishna Prem, which is the perfection of life, the perfection of devotional practice. Once Srila Bhakti-Chandra Maharaj actually mentioned that the process in order to reach the stage of Nishtha and Ruchi is somewhat struggling. But then, when one reaches that stage, these higher stages of Ruchi, Ashakti, Jashi Shigonitai, Jagannath Baladev Subhadra, Ashakti, Bhav and Prem, they actually develop rather swiftly. So there we can see the major task for us, for a devotee, is actually to purify ourselves from these unwanted things, to come to the stage of being fixed in devotional service. And then the process actually becomes much easier, because it becomes natural. At that stage we are naturally attracted to follow the process. In the beginning, we actually have to force ourselves. As Prabhupada points it out, it's in somewhat artificial. It's not natural. We have to force ourselves due to being convinced that this is the process which will ultimately give us the satisfaction we are looking for. But we have to convince ourselves and put that endeavor in. Whereas at that stage of being fixed and having understood our own position as being spiritual, then it becomes somewhat natural to follow that path. At the same time, it is also said that the devotee actually follows the regulative process, even having attained a certain stage. Prabhupada points out in Nectar of Devotion that even at the stage of Ashakti, the devotee actually follows very scrutinizingly the process of regulative principles. As we also know, even up to the stage of bhava, there is the chance to fall down, meaning being enamored by the external energy of the Lord. Only when we reach the stage of prem, we are actually safe, so to say. But anyway, these are quite advanced, quite lofty states of consciousness. And we also shouldn't worry too much about being situated in different mellows. Sometimes different individuals propagate that as we are engaged in devotional service, we actually should develop different rasas, different relationships, as it is described in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu by Srila Rupa Goswami. There are different relationships the individual soul can have with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, which are friendship, parental relation, or the relationship as a lover. But these are very lofty and very high stages of consciousness. And Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur describes that we as devotees of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, we should simply strive to serve Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in the mood of dasya, of a servant, to serve his mission, the Sankirtan mission. And by doing that, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu actually will reveal or will elevate ourselves when the time has come to the different stages of relationships which there are in Vrindavan. We shouldn't be bothered by ourselves to try to establish. It has been disclaimed it's not a matter of imagination. It's rather a matter of revelation. When the time is right, when the Supreme Personality of Godhead acknowledges the service of His devoted servant, He actually will reveal the relationship which He has with His servant. Because otherwise there is the danger that we take these very lofty, highly awaited stages of devotional service in a mundane understanding, which will be detrimental to our progress in our devotional life, and finally will destroy our devotional endeavor. So we shouldn't be too much worried and just practice devotional service as it has been enunciated in the scriptures, and serve the mission of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to distribute the holy name in every town and every village. And by doing that, the guarantee is given that we actually will be elevated to the perfection of life at the end of our lives. Okay, Hare Krishna. Are there any questions, comments?
Hare Krishna, thank you. You nicely described these 9 stages and also emphasized how Nishta is like that's what the purification is so important. Afterwards it will go easier. Sometimes I'm just trying to understand better, because sometimes we hear that devotees quote Prabhupada that if we practice Krishna consciousness, then automatically we will make progress in advance. So I'm always trying to understand how much do we actually have a personal endeavor in the sense of like an inner work, be introspective and work on our anarthas, or how much we just have to focus on Krishna and the taste in devotional service. Do you understand the question? Like, how much is it just automatically, or how much do we have to actually do some inner work in that sense to get purified from these anarthas?
I believe both is necessary or can be helpful. Once again, it starts with having faith in the process, and the process starts with hearing and chanting, Sravana Kirtana, Vishnu Smaranam. These are actually the most important ingredients for a devotee, to hear attentively and then to recite ourselves, and through that Vishnu Smaranam actually takes place, which is the goal of our life. Srila Rupa Goswami has said that there are two things necessary. Always to think of Krishna and never forget Krishna. So, actually, to chant the holy name of the Lord constantly with full faith, that will be enough. That is the secret of success. But then at the same time, to be introspective and to realize where we actually stand is necessary. Or to say it like that, it is very helpful, because it's also said a devotee always knows where he stands. And if we know where we stand, and if we detect our anarthas, our shortcomings, we can consciously work on it, which naturally will help the process and speed up the process. Or we can say it like that, the focus actually should be on trying to chant the holy name in a pure way. But it will be helpful if we can to also work actively and consciously on our anarthas, whereas the focus should be on the pure chanting.
Yeah, we can say if we just try to work on our anarthas without Shravanam Kirtanam, then it's kind of, then we kind of misunderstood the point.
Just wanted to say that we shouldn't get, sidetracked to try to find out where our anarthas are, because that will be revealed automatically when we chant. Finally, all the power and all the enlightenment comes from the proper chanting of the holy name. It's not that we have to know in order to chant properly. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Hare Krishna.
Prabhupada said, Krishna consciousness, the process of Krishna consciousness is simple for the simple and complicated for the complicated. Actually, that's a good example. It's not necessary to delve too much, or it's not a requirement to know so much things. What anarthas is now really bothering. It's good enough if you have full faith in the holy name. That will take care. As we also know that knowledge, the true knowledge is revealed in the heart. It can be achieved, by studying the Vedic scriptures or by any other empirical process. True knowledge is revealed in the heart. There are so many beautiful examples in this way. By following the process. Like Sri Chaitanya came across that one devotee while traveling in South India. I'm sure you all know that story. Who was instructed by his spiritual master to read Bhagavad Gita every day. But that devotee was illiterate. He couldn't read. But he was that faithful to the instructions of his spiritual master, but that still every day he opened Bhagavad Gita and read it. So sometimes he would hold the Bhagavad Gita topsy-turvy, the other way around. And some of devotees around him would laugh at him. But then when Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came, he actually also noticed, but he noticed that he would cry while reading Bhagavad Gita. So then he would ask him, why you're that devotee, why you're reading Bhagavad Gita? And that devotee would answer that actually, I don't know how to read, but my spiritual master instructed me to read Bhagavad Gita every day. So I'm trying my best. I'm taking Bhagavad Gita and opening the pages and go through. But I can't read. But then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, but then why you're crying? Then that devotee said, because while doing that, I'm remembering how merciful the Lord was by instructing Arjuna on the battlefield. And when I think of that, I start to cry, I feel ecstasy. Then Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, that is the perfection. So even not being able to read, but he was constantly thinking of Krishna and realizing or appreciating the magnanimity, the mercy, the Supreme Personality of Godhead showered towards Arjuna. And through that, actually, that is the perfection of our life. And there are also other devotees. Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj. Like that, yes. Hare Krishna.
Trying to form this question. Prabhupada said that every devotee should develop sannyas consciousness, which is to give up the fruits of activities. But then there is also the sannyas ashram where someone actually gives up the activities themselves, material activities, being involved in the material world. So then I'm trying to understand why thinking that we need to come off the bodily platform and we need to give up those identifications with the body. So why is someone who is committing suicide punished? Because he's actually giving up the body. He's not just giving up the thinking of the body, but actually giving up the body, just like the sannyasi is actually giving up the activities.
Yeah, but he's doing it himself. He's not doing it on the order of Krishna. This body doesn't belong to us. So if we kill this body, we're taking it away from Krishna. You know, there is a natural process.